Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into the replication crisis in science.
We really are, and it is a big one.
Yeah, it is. So imagine finding out that the textbook you studied in high school, or like the self-help book sitting on your nightstand right now, or even the medical advice you heard on the news just last week. Imagine all of that was based on experiments that completely fail when tested a second time.
It is, frankly, a staggering thought. And, I mean, it's not just an exaggeration. We are looking at a silent earthquake that is basically shaking the very foundation of how we build human knowledge.
Right.
Because for decades, we have all held on to this deeply comforting picture of science.
Oh, absolutely. The folks in the crisp white lab coats.
Exactly. The lab coats, the strict and flawless rules, uncovering absolute, undeniable truths about the universe. But right now, some of the smartest minds on the planet are digging through the history of major discoveries and realizing that the foundation is actually cracked.
Which is wild. So we are going through a massive stack of sources today. We've got articles written by the researchers themselves, data from these massive university projects, and some historical case studies.
Really fascinating case studies, yeah.
Yeah, and we're using all of this to figure out why so many famous discoveries are suddenly turning out to be completely wrong.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to map out why fake ideas spread so fast, and most importantly, how the scientific community is trying to rebuild the foundation.
Right. The fix is important.
It is. But before we get to the massive global studies, we need to talk about high school chemistry.
Yes.
Because there is a story from one of our sources that captures the exact feeling of this crisis.
It really does set the stage beautifully. So let's go back to high school science class. Imagine you are standing at one of those heavy black countertops with your lab partner.
I can literally smell the science classroom right now, like that weird mix of bleach and rubber tubing.
Oh, it is completely burned into all of our memories. So your assignment for the day is to grow crystals. You are given a cup of water, a blue chemical powder, and a little wooden stick.
Okay.
You mix it up, you drop the stick in, and you wait.
Just staring at the cup.
Right. And you are waiting, and all around the room, the other groups of students are starting to point and cheer because their crystals are growing.
Oh no, I know where this is going.
Yeah, these beautiful, geometric, perfect blue crystals are forming on their wooden sticks. But you look down at your cup and you have absolutely nothing.
Just a wet piece of wood.
Just a wet piece of wood in a cup of murky water.
That is the ultimate sinking feeling. Like you just know you messed up.
You do. The bell rings, the room clears out, and you were just standing there staring at your failure. And then your teacher walks over, looks at your desk, and just points to a little unopened plastic bag of white powder sitting behind your notebook. You completely forgot to put the salt in the water.
So it was just user error, like a classic mistake.
Exactly. But I mean, think about the lesson there. The teacher said, crystals can't grow if the salt is not in the solution.
Right.
And for centuries, this is how humanity assumed all of science worked. It felt incredibly concrete. You have a clear set of instructions, and if the experiment doesn't work out the way you expected, well, it simply means you did something wrong.
You dropped a test tube or something.
Right. You measured badly, you forgot the salt, whatever.
I see the logic. But the earthquake we are talking about today isn't about high schoolers forgetting steps, is it?
Not at all. And that is where the crystal story takes a very dark turn. Because what we are seeing today is what happens when the most highly trained, brilliant scientists in the world decide to repeat a famous experiment.
Okay.
They read the original instructions. They follow every single step perfectly. They measure the temperature to the exact decimal point. They absolutely, without a doubt, remember to put the salt in the water.
Yeah.
And the crystals still do not grow.
Oh, wow. That shifts the blame entirely. Because, if you did everything flawlessly and the result is still a wet piece of wood, it means the original person who claimed they grew crystals might have been completely wrong.
Yes.
Or they just got wildly lucky.
Exactly. It forces a pretty terrifying question. Is the original theory broken? Or is the universe just far more chaotic than the original scientist wanted to admit?
That is intense. So if a failure to repeat an experiment is like baking a bad cake, I guess the obvious next question is how we actually check these recipes.
Right.
In the sources, the scientists use two words constantly. They talk about reproducing and replicating. And they sound like synonyms, but they actually describe two totally different ways of checking a scientist's work, right?
They really do.
Let's break those down using a baking analogy just to keep it in plain, everyday language for you listening.
Baking is the perfect way to visualize this. So Let's start with reproducing. Imagine a famous baker writes a best-selling cookbook, and they claim they have invented the ultimate chocolate cake.
Okay, I am on board with the ultimate chocolate cake.
Right. So reproducing their work is like taking their exact written recipe, their exact list of ingredients, their exact oven temperatures, their exact math, and just reading through it with a calculator.
So you aren't actually in the kitchen.
No, you are sitting at a desk checking their logic. You are making sure that if the recipe calls for 2 cups of flour and 1 cup of cocoa powder, the total dry ingredients actually equal 3 cups.
Okay.
You aren't mixing anything, you aren't turning on an oven, you are just checking their math homework.
Wait, so if a scientist publishes a study on, say, a new blood pressure medicine, reproducing just means a second scientist takes the first scientist's original spreadsheet, runs the numbers through a computer, and says, yep, the addition and subtraction is correct.
That is exactly what it means.
Right.
It is a crucial first step, obviously, because humans make math errors all the time. But checking the math on a piece of paper does not prove the cake actually tastes good in the real world.
Which brings us to replicating.
Right. Replicating is when you put the calculator away. You take the baker's instructions, you drive to the grocery store, you buy your own brand new flour and sugar, you go into your own kitchen, turn on your own oven, and you bake the cake completely from scratch.
And then you actually eat it to see if it's the ultimate chocolate cake.
Exactly. In the scientific world, replicating means setting up a brand new physical experiment. You don't look at the old data. You gather a whole new group of people to test, you collect brand new information, and you see if you get the exact same physical result that the original scientist claimed to get.
Okay, so just to lock this in, reproducing is checking the math on the paper.
Yes.
Replicating is doing the experiment over again in the real world.
You have the distinction perfectly.
Okay, so if a failure to replicate is like baking a bad cake, how many bad cakes are sitting in the bakery window right now? Like, did we just find one bad batch, or is the whole kitchen on fire? When did scientists realize this was a massive problem?
Well, there were murmurs and concerns for years, but the massive, undeniable shockwave hit the scientific community in 2015.
What happened in 2015?
A colossal group of researchers. We're talking over 200 scientists working together across different laboratories. They decided to do something no one had ever attempted on this scale.
Okay.
They took 100 famous, highly respected psychology experiments that had been published in top-tier magazines.
Like the really big ones.
The textbook studies, the ideas everyone accepted as pure fact, and this massive team decided to replicate all 100 of them.
Wow.
They went back into the kitchen to bake 100 cakes from scratch.
I can't even imagine the logistics of coordinating 200 researchers to redo 100 separate experiments. But what was the final score? How many of the cakes tasted right?
When the dust settled, only about 1 in 3 of those famous studies actually worked the second time around.
Wait, I want to make sure I heard that right. Only 1 in 3.
Yeah.
You're saying that roughly 64% of these famous foundational psychology experiments completely failed when someone else tried to do them.
The results were devastating. For the majority of the studies, the effects they found were either incredibly weak compared to the original claims, or the expected result just vanished entirely into thin air. Nothing happened. The crystals didn't grow.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Because when I first read that in the sources, my immediate reaction was to defend the science. I thought, well, of course psychology is messy. Human brains are messy.
Right, that's a common thought.
We have different moods, we grew up in different cultures, we have varying stress levels. It makes complete logical sense that a psychology test about memory or mood might work perfectly on a stressed-out college student in New York, but completely fail on a relaxed retiree in Tokyo.
Absolutely.
So is this just a psychology problem? Because humans are unpredictable. What about the hard, physical sciences like medicine or biology?
It is a very natural defense mechanism to think that way.
Yeah.
We really want to believe that the hard sciences, the things dealing with cells and chemicals, are immune to this kind of messiness.
Right.
But the data paints a very grim picture across the board.
Oh, no.
Let's look at cancer research, which is arguably the most high-stakes life-or-death science we have.
Yeah. Definitely.
A massive global pharmaceutical company wanted to develop new cancer treatments. And to do that, they first needed to rely on the existing knowledge. So they looked at 53 landmark foundational cancer studies.
The big ones.
The golden papers, the ones that everyone in the medical field relied on to understand how certain tumors grow or how certain chemicals kill cancer cells.
The bedrock of their research.
The absolute bedrock. But before they spent billions of dollars making new drugs, this company decided to replicate those 53 golden studies in their own private labs.
That makes sense.
They bought the chemicals, grew the cells, and followed the recipes. And they could only get 11% of those studies to work.
11% in cancer research.
Only 6 out of 53 landmark studies held up.
That is horrifying.
And this wasn't an isolated incident either. Another major medical company did a massive internal review of the published studies they were relying on for drug development, and they found that only 25% of them could be replicated.
That is deeply unsettling. We aren't talking about personality quizzes or mood rings here. We're talking about the physical biology of disease.
Exactly.
If a chemical kills a tumor in one lab, it should absolutely kill the same kind of tumor in another lab, regardless of the mood of the scientist holding the test tube.
It absolutely should. And the crisis reaches into fields entirely based on cold, hard numbers, too. Take economics, for example.
Okay.
There is a deeply fascinating story in our sources about two highly respected economists. Back in 2010, they published a major earth-shattering paper. They claim that when a country's national debt goes over 90% of its total economy, its economic growth essentially hits a brick wall and stops.
Oh, I remember that. It was everywhere. Politicians were quoting it on every news channel, holding up charts.
Yes, because it sounded incredibly authoritative, backed by massive amounts of historical data. And this single idea heavily influenced the national budgets of entire countries.
Wow.
Lawmakers used this specific study to justify massive spending cuts, laying off workers, and imposing austerity measures around the world, all to avoid hitting that magical 90% danger zone.
So real people lost their jobs because of this paper.
Countless real-world impacts. But a few years later, a graduate student at a different university was trying to reproduce their work.
Reproduce, so just checking the math.
Right. Remember, reproducing just means checking the math. The student wasn't running a new experiment. He just asked the original famous economists to send him their Excel spreadsheet so he could trace their logic.
Oh, no. I use spreadsheets every day. I know exactly the kind of mundane disaster that is about to happen.
You probably do. The student opened the spreadsheet, clicked on the formula that calculated the grand average of all the countries, and found a basic elementary error.
Love it.
The economists had accidentally failed to highlight all the countries in their data column.
No.
They literally just missed a few rows at the bottom of the screen when they dragged their mouse down.
You have got to be kidding me. A highlight error. Like when you drag the little blue box in Excel and let go too early.
A simple manual highlight error. They accidentally left countries like Australia and Canada out of the final math.
That is insane.
And when the student simply fixed the spreadsheet formula, when he just included the missing rows, that massive, terrifying warning about national debt completely disappeared.
Just gone.
Gone. The corrected math showed that countries over 90% debt actually continued to grow just fine. The entire foundation of global budget cuts was based on a slip of the mouse.
That is mind-blowing. Think about the books sitting on your desk right now. Think about the health articles you bookmarked. Drink this type of green tea to live 10 years longer, or arrange your office this way to be more productive.
Right.
How much of the advice we build our lives around is based on a study that might completely vanish if a second group of scientists just tried to test it, or if someone just double-checked the spreadsheet.
It demands a complete rewiring of how we consume information.
It really does. To really understand how these ideas take root in our culture and then fall apart, let's look at the Hall of Fame of Fragile Ideas.
Oh, I like that name.
Yeah, let's put names to these bad cakes. We need to explore specific, famous concepts that everyone absolutely believed but which crumbled under a second look.
Okay, well, one of the most famous examples in modern psychology is the concept of the willpower battery, or as the scientists originally called it, ego depletion.
I used to talk about this all the time. The idea was so relatable.
It was.
It claimed that willpower is like a video game energy bar, right? Like, if I use all my willpower to resist eating a massive slice of pizza at lunch, my internal energy bar is drained. So by 5 o'clock, I physically won't have enough willpower left to focus on a hard puzzle or go to the gym or resist snapping at my neighbor.
It made perfect intuitive sense. We all feel exhausted after making hard choices, and the original experiment seemed to capture this perfectly.
How did they do it?
They put people in a room with fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies and radishes.
Okay, weird combo.
Very.
Yeah.
Some people were allowed to eat the cookies. Others were told they could only eat the radishes and had to resist the cookies. Then they gave both groups a completely impossible puzzle to solve.
Just to see who would give up first.
Exactly. And the original study found that the people who had to use their willpower to resist the cookies gave up on the puzzle much faster. They concluded that willpower is a limited physical resource that gets used up. This single idea launched 1,000 ships. Hundreds of follow-up studies were published. Best-selling self-help books were written about how to manage your daily willpower budget. It was accepted as a fundamental law of human behavior.
But then the earthquake hit.
The earthquake hit hard. Recently, massive teams of scientists from different laboratories all over the world joined forces to replicate the original cookie and radish experiment.
Oh,
They used thousands of participants across multiple countries to make absolutely sure their test was as strong as possible. And when they ran the massive new numbers, the drained battery effect completely vanished.
really?
Yes. Resisting a cookie simply did not predictably or universally drain a person's ability to focus on a puzzle later. The effect was practically zero.
So an entire industry of self-help advice telling people they need to conserve their daily energy was based on a mirage.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, what about another one? This one genuinely breaks my heart because I definitely did it in the bathroom before job interviews. Power posing.
Ah, yes. The ultimate fake-it-till-you-make-it phenomenon.
Yeah.
The original claim was incredibly enticing. It stated that if you go into a private room and stand like a superhero for 2 solid minutes, hands on your hips, chest puffed out, chin up, taking up space, it doesn't just make you feel good psychologically. The claim was that it physically alters your body chemistry.
Right. The idea was that standing like Superman actually lowers your stress hormones, like cortisol, and raises your dominance hormones, like testosterone.
Yes.
It was supposed to make you physically and measurably more successful in high-stakes situations. It was the subject of one of the most viewed online talks in history.
It was a beautiful narrative offering a free 2-minute biological life hack, but the problem is the mechanics of the original test. When a completely different group of scientists tried to retest it properly, they used much larger groups of people. They took the saliva samples and measured the hormones using much stricter rules. And those magical physical changes in the body chemistry just couldn't be found. The stress hormones weren't dropping, and the dominance hormones weren't spiking. The physical biological benefit simply didn't exist when tested a second time.
Why did it work the first time then? Were the first scientists just making up the hormone numbers?
No, not necessarily making them up, but dealing with something we call a tiny sample size.
Okay.
If you only test a handful of people, the natural random fluctuation of human hormones can look like a massive trend. If you have 5 people stand like superheroes, and 2 of them just happen to be having a naturally low-stress day, the average of your tiny group looks amazing.
Ah, I see.
When you test 500 people, that random luck balances out and the truth reveals itself.
It's amazing how deeply these ideas get embedded in our culture before anyone bothers to test 500 people.
It is.
But we have to talk about my absolute favorite example from the sources. And by favorite, I mean the one that is both hilarious and deeply terrifying. The time-traveling Beatles song.
Oh, this is a legendary paper in the scientific community. It was designed specifically to expose the mechanical flaws in the entire system.
Okay, let me set this up for you. A group of scientists published a study in a real, respected, peer-reviewed magazine. And in this study, they claimed that listening to the song When I'm 64 by the Beatles literally made the people listening to it biologically younger.
Yes.
Not that the song made them feel nostalgic, not that it put a spring in their step. The paper claimed their actual physical age went backward.
Which is obviously a violation of the fundamental laws of physics. Time travel does not exist.
Right. The scientists didn't secretly invent a time machine. They didn't uncover the fountain of youth hidden in a pop song. They published this completely absurd, literally impossible study on purpose.
They did.
But how do they prove it? What was the mechanism that let them show a physically impossible thing was scientifically true?
Well, their goal was to show how incredibly easy it is to use entirely legal, standard math tricks to force a fake idea into reality. The mechanism is all about measuring too many random things at once.
Break that down for me. How do you measure time travel?
Imagine bringing 20 college students into a room. You play them the Beatles song, then you want to see if they got younger. But you don't just ask them their age.
Yep.
You ask them a massive, exhausting list of completely random questions. You ask their age, yes, but you also ask their father's age, their mother's age, how many siblings they have, what they ate for lunch, their favorite color, their shoe size, how many times they blink in a minute, and what day of the week they were born on.
You just barrow them in random variables.
Exactly. You measure dozens and dozens of totally unrelated things. Because human beings are naturally varied, if you compare two groups of 10 people across 50 different random measurements purely by chaotic mathematical chance, one group is going to accidentally score differently on at least one question.
Oh, I see it. Just by pure luck, the group that listened to the song happened to have a slightly lower average age than the group that sat in silence. Not because of the song, but just because of the random people who walked into the room that day.
Precisely. The scientists took that one single lucky random difference, the age, and they ignored the 49 other things they measured that showed absolutely no change.
Wow.
They threw out the shoe size data, the lunch data, the blinking data. They only published the age data and loudly announced the music caused the age to drop.
That is wild.
And the crazy part is they followed all the accepted rules of data analysis at the time, and those rules allowed them to prove time travel.
So if scientists aren't actually finding time machines, how are these incredibly flawed, mathematically tricky results becoming the backbone of science? Are scientists just villains? Are they sitting in a dark room intentionally manipulating data to trick us?
No, the vast majority of scientists are incredibly hardworking, honest people who deeply, genuinely care about uncovering the truth. The problem isn't the players, it's the game they're forced to play. Scientists are trapped in a very badly designed system. To understand this, we have to look at the rules of their world and the crushing pressure of a concept called publish or perish.
Publish or perish.
Yeah.
You hear that phrase tossed around a lot in movies about college professors, but it describes a very harsh reality, right?
It is the defining rule of a researcher's entire existence. If you are a young scientist working at a university, your job security, your chances of getting promoted, and the funding you desperately need to keep your laboratory open all depend on one single metric.
Which is?
You must publish exciting, new, groundbreaking discoveries in major scientific magazines.
So nobody gets a promotion for walking into their boss's office and saying, hey, everyone, I just spent 3 grueling years testing this new idea, and it turns out absolutely nothing happened. It was a dead end.
Exactly. A dead end is the truth, but that doesn't get you a job.
Right.
And that intense pressure creates a massive distortion in what information actually reaches the public.
Yeah.
We call this distortion the file drawer problem.
I was trying to think of a good way to visualize the file drawer problem, and I came up with an analogy about sports.
Let's hear it.
Imagine there is a daily sports magazine, but the editors have a very weird, very strict rule. They will only ever print stories about basketball games that end in a miraculous half-court, last-second buzzer beater.
That is a fantastic way to picture it.
If you read that magazine every day, and it was your only source of sports news, you'd walk around believing that every single basketball game ever played is a mind-blowing down-to-the-wire miracle.
You would.
But the reality is the magazine is just ignoring all the normal, boring games where a team wins easily by 15 points. But wouldn't someone eventually notice that the magazine is completely ignoring reality?
You would hope so. But in the scientific world, the boring games are completely invisible. Think about a scientist testing a new medicine. Yeah. They run a massive trial, and the medicine does absolutely nothing to cure the disease. The scientist writes it up and sends it to a major magazine. The editors look at it and say, well, this is boring. It doesn't cure anything. We aren't publishing this.
So what does the scientist do with 3 years of work?
They literally print out the data, sigh, and shove it into a file drawer in the bottom of their desk. It never sees the light of day.
Man.
Because the magazines only want the exciting, groundbreaking miracles. We, the public, only ever get to read about the lucky flukes that look like buzzer beaters.
Yeah.
The file drawers of the world are stuffed with the boring, undeniable truth.
Okay, that explains why we only see the exciting stuff. But how do scientists use math to actually create a buzzer beater out of thin air?
Yeah.
Like with the Beatles song. There are other tricks in the sources, right?
Yes. The most common trick is something we can describe as flipping the coin until you win.
Flipping the coin.
Some people call it data torturing. The joke is, if you torture the data long enough, it will eventually confess to whatever you want. Let me explain the mechanics using a simple coin toss.
Okay, I have a quarter in my hand right now.
Perfect. Let's say you desperately need to publish a paper to keep your job, and you decide your grand theory is that coins are magically rigged to land on heads.
Right.
So you start your experiment, you flip the coin 10 times. Now, we all know a coin should be 50-50.
Right.
But just by pure, random, chaotic luck, in this specific set of 10 flips, it only lands on heads twice.
Okay, so I got 2 heads and 8 tails out of 10 flips.
Right. Now, instead of slipping it 100 more times to see if it balances out, you stop the experiment immediately.
I just stopped.
You stop, you write a grand, dramatic paper complete with charts and graphs and loudly announce to the world, I have conducted a rigorous experiment and my data proves that coins have a 20% chance of landing on heads.
Oh, wow. I see the deception there.
Yeah.
Because technically, I am not lying about my specific game.
Mhm.
If someone checks my math in my specific experiment, it really did land on heads 20% of the time. But I am completely lying about how reality actually works.
Yes. You stopped the experiment the exact moment the random luck gave you an extreme weird result. If you had flipped the coin 10,000 times, it absolutely would have balanced out to 50%.
Right.
But you didn't. You took a tiny, lucky sample, captured a weird fluke, and published it as a universal law of nature.
That perfectly leads into another trick mentioned in the sources. It's like a guy holding a bow and arrow. He walks up to a completely blank wooden wall, closes his eyes, and shoots the arrow into the wood.
Okay.
Then he walks up to wherever the arrow stuck, pulls out a bucket of paint, and paints a perfect bullseye right around the arrow. He steps back, points at the wall, and says, "Look, everyone, I hit a perfect bullseye on my very first try."
That is a very famous practice. Scientists actually have an acronym for it, HARKing.
Harking.
It stands for hypothesizing after the results are known, but guessing after the fact, or painting the bullseye, describes the mechanism perfectly.
How does that actually play out in a lab, though? They aren't shooting arrows at walls.
No, they are shooting massive amounts of data into computers. Imagine a scientist gathers a mountain of random information from thousands of people. They do exactly what the Beatles study did.
Just a crazy survey.
Yeah, they ask them hundreds of unrelated questions. What they eat for breakfast, what their favorite color is, how many hours they sleep, what their shoe size is, what kind of car they drive.
Okay.
They take all these thousands of variables and run them through a computer program, just looking for anything that matches up.
Just fishing for a pattern.
Exactly. And by pure mathematical luck, the computer spits out a finding. It turns out that people in this specific group who like the color green also happen to eat more carrots.
Which is obviously just a completely random coincidence.
It means absolutely nothing.
Right.
But the scientist needs a publication, so they paint the bullseye. They write a series paper claiming that they had a brilliant psychological theory from the very beginning. They claim that green lovers are naturally, biologically drawn to green-topped vegetables due to ancient evolutionary survival instincts, and that they designed the entire massive experiment specifically to prove this genius idea.
Oh my gosh. They pretend they predicted the random match.
They pretend they aimed for the bullseye when really they just painted it around a random arrow.
So, between the crushing pressure to publish only exciting things, hiding all the boring failures in a file drawer, stopping experiments early to capture lucky coin flips, and painting bullseyes around random coincidences, it's a wonder any science is accurate at all.
It does paint a grim picture of human behavior, but here's where we reach the deepest, most complicated, and frankly, the most tragic part of the replication crisis.
There's more.
Yes. Let's imagine a perfect world. Even if we completely eliminated all of those bad behaviors, even if every single scientist was an absolute saint who never hit a file, never painted a fake bullseye, never flipped a lucky coin, and followed the rules perfectly,
Okay.
they would still accidentally publish a massive amount of false discoveries.
Wait, I need you to explain that. If they do everything perfectly, with no tricks, no pressure, and pure honesty, they can still be completely wrong. How is that mechanically possible?
Because there is a trap hidden in the basic math itself. It is at the very heart of how we calculate the chances of an idea being true.
Okay, let's unpack this carefully because I want to make sure I completely understand the mechanics. In the notes, you used an analogy about a rare disease to explain this math trap. Let's walk through it.
Yes, let's step away from science experiments for a second and imagine a medical test at a hospital. Imagine there is a test for a very rare, entirely fictional disease. The creators of this medical test boast that it is 95% accurate.
95% accurate sounds incredibly reassuring. If a doctor gives me a test that is 95% accurate, I am feeling pretty confident in whatever the result says.
It sounds fantastic on the surface, but let's do the math and look at what that 5% error rate actually means when you apply it to the real world.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say we give this test to 1,000 completely healthy people. Because the test has a built-in 5% error rate, it is going to accidentally tell 5% of those completely healthy people that they are sick.
Okay, let me do the math. 5% of 1,000 people is 50 people. So 50 completely healthy individuals are going to get a terrifying, entirely false alarm saying they have this disease.
Correct. Now remember our setup. This is a very rare disease. Let's say in our entire massive group of 1,000 people, only one single person actually has the real disease.
Okay.
The test is great, so it will correctly find that one sick person,
Yeah.
but it will also generate those 50 false alarms.
Oh, wow.
So out of all the positive test results the doctor gets back, 50 of them are totally fake and only one is real.
That is crazy.
The false alarms vastly outnumber the actual sick people simply because the disease itself is so rare. The accuracy of the test is buried by the rarity of the thing it's looking for.
I see the mechanics of that perfectly. But why don't they just make a test that is 100% accurate? Why allow the 5% error rate at all?
Because in the physical world, perfection is impossible. Instruments have limits. Humans have natural biological variations. A 0% error rate does not exist in nature. So science mathematically agreed, decades ago, to accept a 5% margin of error as the standard for proving something is true.
Okay, so how do we apply this rare disease math to scientists testing ideas in a lab?
Think about what scientists are doing every single day. They are standing at the absolute edge of human knowledge. They are testing wild, brand new guesses about how the universe works or how the brain operates.
Right.
By definition, because these are bold, unheard of guesses, most of them are going to be wrong. True, earth-shattering, groundbreaking ideas are incredibly rare. They are just as rare as that fictional disease.
I see exactly where this is going.
So imagine the global scientific community tests 1,000 wild new guesses this year. Because they're bold guesses, almost all of them are totally wrong. But the standard math that all scientists use, the universally accepted rulebook, allows for that 5% error rate. It's literally built into their calculators.
Oh, no.
So out of those 1,000 totally wrong guesses, the math is going to accidentally say that 50 of them are brilliant, correct discoveries.
So 50 completely false ideas will pass the test with flying colors, purely by the mechanical accident of statistics.
Exactly. And because true, groundbreaking ideas are so incredibly rare, those 50 accidental false alarms will vastly outnumber the 1 or 2 actual true discoveries made that year.
That is the ultimate realization. That is the core of the earthquake. Even if every scientist is a saint, even if nobody is torturing data or painting bullseyes, the basic math itself guarantees that a massive chunk of the breakthrough discoveries published in magazines will be total accidental fluke.
It is an unavoidable mechanical reality of statistics. If you test enough false ideas, the tiny 5% error rate will eventually hand you a giant stack of fake positive results.
Wow. So we have all these accidental false alarms floating around out there in the world, generated by math. Plus the fake ones created by bad tricks, like painting the bullseye.
Right?
But surely this system cleans itself up, right? When other scientists realize the mistake or when a replication fails, the bad idea just fades away, the public stops believing it, the textbooks get updated, and we move on.
You desperately hope so. But the data shows something deeply disturbing about human psychology. We're dealing with a popularity contest, and the boring truth is almost always losing.
I actually have a shocking statistic from our sources right here to back that up. There was a major study done by researchers at UC San Diego.
Right, the citation study.
Yeah, they wanted to track what happens to scientific papers after they fail a replication test. They tracked the citations, like how often other scientists quote the paper. And they found that papers which are proven to be totally false are cited by other scientists 153 times more often than papers that are proven to be completely true.
It is staggering. 153 times more popular after they are proven wrong.
Why does this happen? Mechanically, why on earth do fake ideas win the popularity contest in a community of geniuses?
Well, it comes down to human nature and the mechanics of storytelling. False ideas, especially the ones generated by weird flukes, are almost always far more interesting than the boring truth.
Right.
Think about the Beatles time travel study or the superhero power pose. A story about a magical mind-reading trick or a miracle vegetable that cures all sadness is incredibly catchy.
Yes.
It makes a fantastic headline. It spreads like a virus on social media and news outlets.
Right, a headline that says, "Standing like a superhero makes you invincible" is a viral sensation. But a headline that says, "Standing up straight is generally good for your posture, but doesn't actually alter your brain chemistry in any meaningful way" gets absolutely 0 clicks.
Exactly. And scientists, despite their lab coats, are humans too. When they write their own papers, they want to read and reference the most interesting, provocative ideas in their field.
That makes sense.
They want to connect their work to the exciting stuff. So the catchy false idea gets shared and quoted everywhere, while the boring true idea is completely ignored.
But the danger of that viral spread is very real. It's not just about silly power poses or music. It can cause massive generational harm. Let's look at the medical field. In 1998, a major, highly respected medical magazine published a deeply flawed study claiming there was a direct link between vaccines and developmental issues in children.
A classic and deeply tragic example of the crisis.
It took 12 long years for that magazine to officially pull the paper, retract it, and admit it was entirely wrong. But by then, the damage was completely done. It was the ultimate catchy, terrifying headline. It tapped into deep parental fears.
It really did.
And the mechanics of that spread mean that the myth still causes fear, impacts vaccination rates, and affects public health today, decades later.
And that brings us to the mechanical concept of ghost citations.
Ghost citations.
Yeah. You would assume that when a study is officially retracted, when it is proven false and pulled from the magazine, people would physically stop using it.
Naturally.
But they don't. The sources note that even after an idea is publicly debunked, only 12% of future papers even bother to mention that the original idea was proven wrong.
Wait, let me make sure I understand that. Are you saying that 88% of the time, scientists keep quoting the debunked paper in their new work as if it's still a total undeniable fact?
Yes. The bad idea lives on like a ghost, haunting the scientific literature for decades.
How is that mechanically possible? Don't they see a big red stamp on the paper that says fake AE?
They often don't. Think about how scientists work. They download a PDF of a paper 5 years ago. They keep it on their hard drive. When they write a new paper, they quote the PDF they saved.
Oh, I see.
They simply do not have the time or energy to constantly manually check the current status of every single paper they quote to see if it has been secretly debunked recently. So the ghost citation survives because of human limits.
Man, that is grim. We are dealing with human errors, a pressure cooker environment where you have to publish or lose your job, basic statistical math flaws that create fake breakthroughs, and a popularity contest that rewards catchy fake news over boring reality.
It's a lot.
But just when you thought the system couldn't get more complicated, we have a new player entering the board. The modern twist. Artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah. AI is rapidly changing the mechanics of every aspect of society, and science is absolutely no exception. It is a double-edged sword of epic proportions.
Let's start with the sheer physical volume of information. One of our sources is an interview with the CEO of a major science publisher called PLOS.
Yes.
She noted that her organization receives 8,000 scientific papers every single week. 8,000. There is no physical way human beings can carefully read, check the math, and verify the physical reality of 8,000 highly technical papers a week.
It is an absolute unmanageable flood, and this is where the dark side of AI enters the mechanics of the crisis.
How so?
In the past, if a bad actor, someone who just wanted a fake publication to get a promotion, wanted to fake a scientific paper, it actually took a lot of hard work. They had to manually invent the spreadsheet data, write the complex, dense text, and use software to create believable graphs.
That took effort to be a fraud.
Exactly. But now, generative AI makes it incredibly easy and almost instantaneous to generate massive amounts of fake text, perfectly formatted fake data, and even fake microscopic images of cells that look entirely real to the human eye.
So someone can just type a prompt into an AI asking it to write a completely fake but mechanically perfect study about a new cancer drug and submit it to a magazine in 5 seconds.
Yes, and it is sparking a massive silent arms race in the publishing world. The publishers are being forced to use their own AI tools to catch the fakes. It's an ongoing battle between the AI meant to create illusions and the AI meant to detect them.
Wow.
And frankly, the current detection tools are not consistently reliable. The fakers are winning.
Okay, but I have to push back a little here. I see the dark side. But isn't AI also the ultimate mechanical solution to this human problem?
How do you mean?
Because computers don't care if a headline is catchy. They don't feel the pressure to get promoted. They don't have file drawers to hide boring things in. They don't get tired of checking citations.
You are hitting on a very profound point, and this is where there is massive hope for the future. Some visionary researchers are proposing a totally new way of doing science to fix the ghost citation problem, and it relies heavily on AI acting as a sort of flawless, automated, helpful robot librarian.
I love the sound of that. Walk me through the mechanics. How would a robot librarian actually work?
Right now, scientists write papers exactly like they're writing magazine articles. They use lots of text, they tell a compelling story, and they include static, unchangeable pictures of their graphs.
Right.
Well, computers are notoriously bad at reading human stories and understanding context. The proposal is that scientists should fundamentally stop writing standard articles. Instead, they would submit structured, raw data.
Explain structured data to me.
Imagine, instead of a beautiful paragraph describing your results, you just submit a highly organized spreadsheet that a computer program can perfectly read, instantly understand, and mathematically process without needing a human to interpret the words.
So way less storytelling, way more spreadsheets.
Exactly. And this leads to the concept of a living library. Imagine a giant global database. If someone publishes a new study on the health benefits of meditation, they don't just write a catchy summary for a magazine, they upload their raw spreadsheet into the living library.
Okay, I'm with you.
An AI immediately reads that data, instantly combines it with the raw data from the last 500 historical studies on meditation, and updates the global average of human knowledge in real time.
That is an incredible visual. So if a new flashy study comes out tomorrow and claims meditation gives you literal superpowers, the AI instantly compares that new spreadsheet to the 500 older spreadsheets and says, no, it doesn't. This new study is a massive mathematical outlier. We are throwing it out.
Precisely. It acts as an instant shield against flukes. And even better, let's say a famous study from 10 years ago is finally proven to be a complete fraud.
Right.
Currently, as we discussed, it lives on as a ghost citation because humans are too tired to check. But in a living library, the AI instantly pulls that bad spreadsheet out of the database. The global average corrects itself mathematically in seconds.
Wow.
Every scientist connected to the library gets an instant update. The ghost is busted immediately.
That feels like the inevitable future. But AI living libraries might be a few years away from being perfect. What are human scientists doing right now to fix this crisis? Because they're just sitting around in their labs waiting for the robot librarian to save them.
Not at all. The scientific community has launched a massive grassroots reform movement to fix the mechanics of how they work. And one of the most powerful, brilliant tools they have invented is a concept called pre-registration.
I was looking at the mechanics of pre-registration in the notes, and I immediately thought of a game of pool.
Let's hear it.
Think about the bad behavior in science we talked about earlier, painting the bullseye around the arrow. In a game of pool, that's like a player walking up to the table, closing their eyes, smashing the cue ball as hard as they can, watching a striked ball accidentally bounce off 3 walls and fall into a random corner pocket, and then yelling, "I totally meant to do that. I am a genius."
That is a perfect analogy. That is exactly what guessing after the fact looks like. You just hit the data hard, see where it lands, and then claim you predicted it.
But pre-registration changes the mechanics of the game. It is like making a pool player call their shot. Before you are even allowed to touch the cue stick, you have to point at the corner pocket and say, the solid 8 ball is going to go exactly in there, and here's exactly the angle I'm going to hit it from.
That is exactly how pre-registration works in a lab. Before a scientist is allowed to even touch a test tube or ask a single question, they must publicly write down their exact plan.
Before anything happens.
Right. They have to state exactly what they're looking for, exactly how many people they will test, and exactly the math formulas they will use to calculate the answer. They take this written plan and upload it to a public website where it is permanently time-stamped.
So they're completely locked in. They can't change the rules halfway through the experiment if they don't like the results. They can't measure 50 different things, find one lucky coincidence, and pretend that was the plan all along.
Exactly. It completely destroys the ability to torture the data or paint false bullseyes. If your pre-registered plan was to look for a change in stress hormones and you find nothing, you can't suddenly pivot and write a paper about how the experiment changed their shoe size.
Right.
You called your shot and you missed.
That is such an elegant, simple fix. But there's another mechanism that solves the file drawer problem, right? The problem where magazines only publish the exciting buzzer beaters and ignore the boring truth.
Yes. It is a totally new publication format called registered reports. Think about how scientific magazines usually work. They judge a paper after the experiment is entirely finished, based purely on how exciting and catchy the final result is.
Right, but they only want the miracle.
With registered reports, the magazine agrees to review the paper before any data is collected. They look at the scientist's pre-registered plan. They judge the idea solely on how good the question is and how strong the physical methods are.
Okay.
If the scientist is asking a really important question and their plan to test it is flawless, the magazine guarantees they will publish the final paper, regardless of what the outcome is.
Wow. Let me trace the mechanics of that. So even if the scientist spends 3 years, tests 1,000 people, and finds absolutely nothing, even if the result is completely boring, and proves that the new miracle medicine does not work at all, it still gets published on the front page.
It still gets published. This completely annihilates the file drawer problem. It rewards scientists for asking good questions and doing careful, rigorous work, rather than rewarding them for getting lucky, exciting statistical flukes.
That is huge.
Actually, the sources note a massive shift happening right now. Currently, about 58% of all registered reports in psychology are replication studies. Scientists are finally getting credit for checking the recipes. It is fundamentally changing the landscape of the profession.
That is incredibly encouraging. It feels like they're finally fixing the plumbing. And they are also teaming up more to fix the tiny sample size problem, right? Instead of the lone genius working in a basement.
Yes, this is a movement known as massive teamwork or big team science. Instead of one lonely scientist testing 20 college students in a single classroom in Ohio and claiming they discovered a universal human truth, scientists are forming massive global networks.
That sounds way better.
Dozens of laboratories across the world agree to test the exact same idea on thousands of people across multiple different countries and cultures at the exact same time.
It's like taking that ultimate chocolate cake recipe, and instead of baking it once, you have 50 different bakers bake it in 50 different ovens around the world on the same day.
Yeah.
Just to make absolutely sure the recipe works everywhere.
Exactly. It ensures that a finding isn't just a weird fluke based on a small group of similar people in one specific room. It proves the science is durable.
Now, I also want to mention something briefly from our sources just to cover the full scope of what's happening. Even governments are starting to notice the mechanics of this earthquake.
Yeah.
There was a recent U.S. executive order that tried to mandate something called gold standard science for any research project funded by the federal government.
Yes.
They wanted to legally demand strict reproducibility and transparency before giving out grant money.
And it is a fascinating development. While the universal goal of transparency is something everyone in science agrees on, government intervention is a highly debated topic.
I can imagine.
Some researchers point out that creating rigid, politically appointed rules and strict legal definitions of what counts as scientific integrity might accidentally jam the gears. The concern is that it could create impossible administrative hurdles for small, innovative studies to achieve, potentially slowing down the very scientific progress it's trying to protect.
Right, so there are complex debates on all sides about the best way to govern the mechanics of this, but the mere fact that the replication crisis has reached the highest levels of government shows just how vital this issue is to our society.
Absolutely.
So, after walking through the broken math, the file drawers, and the massive global fixes, what does this all mean for you listening right now? How do you apply the mechanics of this deep dive to your daily life?
It's the big question.
I think the biggest takeaway is to fundamentally change how we consume information. When you see a catchy headline on social media about a crazy new psychology trick to read minds or a new miracle diet that will make you live forever, practice healthy, mechanical skepticism. Ask yourself the simple questions. Was this just one small study? How many people were actually tested? Has this exact recipe been baked by anyone else yet?
That is the perfect mindset to adopt. We really have to let go of the comforting illusion that science is a magical vending machine where you put in a question and out pops absolute flawless truth.
Right.
Science is a messy, ongoing, highly human conversation. It proceeds by making bold guesses, making mechanical errors, and then painstakingly correcting those errors. And realizing that science is capable of fixing its own foundation is what makes it so powerful.
Absolutely. As we wrap up our time today, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own. We've spent this entire time talking about how the smartest scientists in the world are questioning their own foundations.
Right. If the most brilliant minds on the planet are currently looking back at decades of textbooks and realizing they have to rewrite them, What deeply held belief do you have right now in your own life that might just be a lucky statistical fluke waiting to be debunked?
Oh, that is a fantastic, unsettling question to end on. Something to think about while you go about your day. Thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and see you in the next dive.